All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Discovering Multifamily. I'm your host, Anthony Scandariato, and we have two very special guests coming to join us this morning, Anselmo Torres III and Kelly Stinson. And they are two very special guests, and they help multifamily property owners save money and save water. So they are both working at Sustainability Solutions, and I'll have them get into more of that. But their company is called SAS, and they're a nationwide provider that focuses on water conservation for large or multifamily properties through installation of ultra-high efficiency plumbing fixtures that result in superior water and money savings. And there's a couple of other unique products within that I'm sure that they'll talk about. But let's welcome our two very special guests, and let's take it from there. How you guys doing?
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having us, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. So if you guys could I gave a brief overview of what you do, but if you could expand on that and, talk about how to reduce operating expenses for multifamily owners, because as multifamily owners, at least the good ones, are always trying to evaluate every month how can they reduce their operating expenses even more to drive their net operating income, which therefore increases the value of the property. So if you guys can kind of talk about that, that would be great.
Sure. So we're in this business day in, day out, and we work with, various types of deal syndicators and investors across the country. And what we find, and it's just like, what you had shared, Anthony, is that for those that are real seasoned and they understand the benefits of water conservation and how that correlates to the net operating income on the property, then as soon as they are evaluating a deal, they're immediately building into the pro forma any type of water conservation, if it makes sense. So let's just kind of open this up with your listeners on the front side and paint this picture. So on average, let's say you have a 200 unit property, multifamily property, and it costs maybe $50,000 to install toilets, shower heads, and aerators, because that's where the bulk of your water usage is occurring on the property, with the exception of irrigation and the pool. But these are the controllables that you can have. And $50,000 to install in a 200 unit property. And then you might see first year on average a $50,000 reduction in the water sewer bill. And that's huge. That is pure, especially if it's an all bills paid property, that's a pure reduction straight off of water sewer. We're not talking about, the soft costs of increasing productivity because the reduced work orders. I mean, this is like real actual reduction on the water sewer bill. And then let's say you are an owner where you're holding your property for 3 to 5 years. Let's say that property is at a 6.5 cap rate, and you do you implement this type of upgrade, then you are able to boost the asset value by almost $770,000. So you get a $50,000 a year reduction on water sewer, and then you're going to boost the asset value $770,000.
So that's if you did nothing at all for the rest of the year, right? If only thing you did was do water conservation, you would get that asset value boost.
Exactly. And you don't have to worry about having to get the residents to change their behaviors. As much as we want to educate the residents, I mean, that's really where Anselmo's and my passion is bringing awareness around how much water we're consuming day in and day out, and the types of, processes and the types of, change management that you can put out there. But that's not sustainable long term, right? Because when that resident goes to renew their lease, or they're adding on residents in their unit, or the unit is turning, then you have to consistently update, right? And make sure that those residents have those changes in their behavior patterns. So the whole thing of turning the faucet off when you're brushing your teeth, I think Anselmo, has attested this to this multiple times. He grew up with his parents yelling at him all the time, turn off the water, turn off the water, turn off the water. Yeah. We're the same way, right? I mean, my kids, they will turn the shower on and then they will drain 2 hot water tanks and still have yet to get in the shower because they're, looking for their outfits and whatever else teenagers do. So these are the types of devices that we can help on the front side with analyzing the property and the state, kind of the health of the plumbing infrastructure, and look for those actual financial opportunities where you can improve NOI on the property.
Got it. Yeah, so that's a great overview. So I guess kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, because a lot of listeners on my show, whether they're involved in an active investment that they own personally or with another partner or with a shop like myself, how do they, for their existing buildings, how does it work to implement this type of infrastructure that you guys are talking about? Because Kelly, I think you mentioned on new acquisitions, a lot of operators are factoring that into their pro forma moving forward. So how do existing operators that have properties, maybe they have 1,000 units, 50 units, whatever the case may be, and kind of 2 questions, what would be the almost minimum amount of units for it to be worth an operator's time to get an ROI that Kelly mentioned?
And so I like to mention, if this were a dating website, our ideal customer, our ideal property would be like a Class B, Class C property, and anything built prior to 1995.
Yep.
And if it's all bills paid, oh my God, that's even way better for us. That's like perfect candidate for us.
Yeah. And on average, the ROI is typically 12 to 16 months. And the water rates are varying all across the country. And that's something, if you are an existing owner and you have, a property that you've had for some time, you probably have noticed an increase in your water rate. And you're like, well, this is just how it is. I'm just going to have to find another area to reduce expenses. But there's so much more that you can do with that. And that's where we come in, and that's where SAS gives back in the community, that if you have a property today and you have concern about, hey, I'm not even sure if $2,000 a month in a water sewer bill is correct on this size property, or if $20,000 a month is correct for this size property and this number of residents, reach out to us. So this is what the process would look like. You would reach out to SAS. We typically will go through what we call a preliminary proposal. This is where we will analyze a couple of months of water sewer bills, so we can get an understanding as to what the seasonality looks like, what the consumption looks like. And then we're going to ask some questions about the property. What year was it built? Has there been any type of interior plumbing upgrades around the toilets, the shower heads, and those little faucet aerators? And then what is the occupancy like on the property? Because we take that into consideration as well. And then we'll formulate together a very conservative analysis on what we think is on the property and where we think we can get you as an owner and how we can improve NOI. And then at that point, if it makes sense, then we would engage in what we call a full assessment. And this is what's really cool, because Anselmo has walked over 30,000 units. So just when, he thinks he's seen it all, or I think I've seen it all, we've got something else that pops up. And so I'm going to turn this over to Anselmo so he can kind of explain what we do in those full assessments.
Yeah. So as Kelly mentioned, I've had the opportunity to walk 30,000 units, and it's probably about 300 properties across the U.S. So as I tend to believe I've seen it all, but every property provides a pleasant surprise. But what happens is, so we walk into every unit, and as we are going through your unit, we are documenting the fixture flow rates of your toilets, your shower heads, and your aerators on both the bathroom and the kitchen. As we're documenting all these flow rates, we're also looking for leaks that we may come across, the front of the wall leaks that are visible or that you can hear. So typically we see a lot of that coming through. The big offenders are toilets and your tub diverters. But we document all of that information. And once we complete our assessment, then we can provide you all that data that we've captured through that full assessment, and as well as identify, these are the leaks that we found, that your maintenance team can get those fixed as soon as possible.
Yeah. And just by shoring up those leaks, Anthony, typically what our owners will benefit from is like a 5 to 7% reduction on their water sewer bill. We see on a consistent basis these flappers in the toilets that are leaking, and those toilets can leak up to 100 gallons a day, if not more. And a lot of times they're very silent leaks. So as a resident, you don't hear those, but we have a trained ear that's what, gets us going. We understand it. We listen for that. But then in addition, we see a lot of those tub diverters, and that's the tub spout in the shower tub combination where you pull the little button and it engages the shower head. And so the shower head is engaged, but the water is still coming out of the tub spout. Either it's still the full force or at a decreased force. And at that point, you could be putting out, 10 gallons a minute of water. And if on average, if the EPA says that each of us are taking a shower, 10 minutes a day, that's a lot of water if you're wasting out 8 to 10 gallons per minute. So what we see often when Anselmo has been walking these properties, and when I've walked these properties over the last couple of years, is that we'll ask residents, hey, how long has this been doing this? How long has this toilet been running? And they're like, oh, for a couple of months. They aren't entering in work orders for this for a couple of reasons that we're coming to find out. Is one, they don't want individuals in their units, right? And then number two, they don't want to be blamed for this particular leak, and they're fearful for it. Or they might just not fully understand what that financial impact is of a leak like this and inefficient fixtures.
And especially kind of in my experience, when a building is owner paid, like Anselmo mentioned, they don't care. What do the tenants care? They're not paying the bill. I lived in for many of my listeners, I still live in a house hack, and it was a lower level. And I actually did this. I let it ride for a couple of weeks just to see if just as a test. And I could hear the toilet constantly running. It was just constantly running. It needed a new flapper. That's all. I knew what it was, but I wanted to do a test and see how long is it going to take for them to say something.
Yes. And how long did it take?
To fix? 5 minutes? Yeah. Not even?
Well, no, how long did it take for them to say something? A couple of weeks?
They didn't. I ended up saying something. They never said anything. Just
exactly.
Case in point.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting.
That's one thing that I really like about what we do, right? Is because it's what I found is it's incredibly difficult to change human behavior. Yeah. To all of a sudden think that they're going to start reporting those leaks or be more conscious of it. Mm-hmm. It's much, much easier to install ultra high efficiency fixtures to get that outcome.
Yeah.
Got it. And so talking about more of what you guys do at SAS, now, is it more of, like you said, the phases of how you guys approach reducing, water conservation, et cetera? Do you guys actually come in with, contractors to install all these new products, or is it more of recommendations? Here's your recommendation report. Like, what does that process look like?
We are all the above. So we will consult on the front side. And Anthony, you had also asked that question earlier about, hey, like what size property would it make sense to engage in a conversation? And my response is, it doesn't matter. Every property out there should be evaluating the consumption, the water consumption, and the water trends. So if you have a triplex, a fourplex, if you've got 20 units, reach out to us and we will help walk you through some of our recommendations and analysis on your property. Now, on something like that, we wouldn't recommend a turnkey install where we would come in and mobilize our team and enter the unit, remove all the inefficient fixtures and put everything in. Usually at that point, it's something like that, you would just purchase the product through us and then your on-site crew would do that. Our crews travel nationwide and our crews will install on average between 50 to 60 bathrooms a day. And this is great because when you have those properties that, let's say are, 50 units, 75 units or more, then you're able to get this project executed and completed very quickly. So that way, within the first full monthly billing cycle, you're able to start benefiting from the reduction on that water sewer bill. And, with SAS, because we come in and we do that full assessment on the front side of documenting all of the flow rates of each fixture, we're also making note along the way of any subflooring issues or any door swing issues. We're measuring the rough-in distance, which is the floor bolts to the back of the wall. We're looking at the condition of the angle stops and the size of those supply lines, because these are critical factors that could slow an install or could shut an install down completely. And the last thing you want to do is mobilize a team out there to kick off an install that's only supposed to take a couple of days, and now all of a sudden it's taken a couple of weeks because you're having to address some things with us along the way that could have been avoided.
Got it. Okay. And a question that I would have for a lot of other multifamily operators who are listening or kind of know the tax benefits of making capital improvements. Are there any sort of incentive programs on the tax side, or is when you actually make these improvements, are they actually considered an improvement where the owner has the ability to come in and depreciate it? What does that look like if you guys are familiar?
That's a great question. So in regard to like cost segregation, this is applicable for that. And my recommendation is that you engage your cost seg partner. So that way we can understand exactly, what was inventoried, and then based on what's going in, how much you're going to be able to deduct, right? But then you also have in certain cities across the country, there are some utility providers out there that are offering rebates back for upgrades in multifamily. And we will help identify where those are and ensure that the invoicing, what we're putting in, everything is set up so that the owner can file for that rebate and get their money back.
Got it. Okay. That's really interesting. So I'm personally going to look into this after the show. And is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Anselmo.
Anthony, I wanted to mention something. So a lot of times we get the question, well, how do I know if I'm spending too much on my water bill, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a difficult question to answer because the water and sewer rates vary tremendously across the country. So my feedback back to your listeners is, as we work with different benchmarking utility companies, they've kind of identified anytime you are spending or using more than 120 gallons per unit, that's kind of not a red flag, but that's just kind of saying, okay, well, we need to dig into this a little bit further, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then once it gets to 160 gallons per unit, that's where they really start asking questions like, there's definitely some rooms for opportunity and efficiency by installing ultra high efficiency toilet showers and aerators. So I would really ask your listeners, do some quick math on your property, look at your bill, divide the consumption by the units, and see what that comes out to. If it's anywhere above 120, it's probably a good thing to ask us, hey, can you help us out? Or can you take a look at my property?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially right now, because this is a super sensitive time, right, with COVID-19. And what we're seeing now is that with everybody being home, we were spreading out a lot of our water consumption amongst those various locations that we were at throughout the day, with kids being at school or, we're out in the field. Well, now everybody is home. So our programs are indicating that the consumption has actually increased on a lot of these multifamily properties 3 to 5 times. And for those property owners that have all bills paid properties, we've gotten past, April rent. We're getting geared up for May rent. And now the utility bills are starting to come in, right? And this is where they may get sticker shock on the utility bill if there's a lot of leaks on the property or if there's inefficient fixtures, because the EPA says that on average we flush our toilets 3 to 5 times a day. So if you have 2 people in a unit and they're each flushing 3 times a day, that's a lot of water, especially if you're still running 3.5 gallon per flush toilets, which we see a lot of in properties that were built before 1985. So with that, we just, ask to be aware of that and know that there's opportunities to shore that up. And while you may not want to be entering units right now for an upgrade, this is where we can help make recommendations around shoring up leaks and getting that resident education during this, transition time where you put some of this water awareness into the community newsletter. And we've got some ideas on that. We'd be more than happy to, take those calls or take those inquiries from those owners that want to share that.
Those are all really, really good points. It's fortunate for the owners to be invested in a market where they're able to pass on the water bills. But for the properties that you mentioned, Anselmo, those years built prior to 1990 or whatever it is, typically it is owner paid, and I personally pay for probably 70% of my portfolio's water bill because those properties were built before that time period. And it's definitely a large operating expense. So if there's any way to reduce it, this is the way to do it. So if there's any other closing remarks, usually what I like to do is I ask a few fire round questions. So in this case would be for both of you. Just 3 quick questions. Number 1 being, do you have a favorite business or real estate book?
Kelly?
So a book that I recently finished, and Anselmo and I had the pleasure of meeting the author not too long ago, is Maintenance Man to Millionaire by Glenn Gonzalez. I highly recommend checking it out because it is an amazing story of his journey throughout his professional career and how he has moved in to be a top real estate owner.
And I'll say Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That book is just like turned on a light bulb for me.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Got it. And then the second question would be, do you guys have any hobbies outside of water conservation and real estate?
Well, Anselmo is taking up a new celebrity side, right? On TikTok.
Oh yeah, TikTok. You got to be creative. It's so fun. But I really loved biking before, but now it's just I love it even more because we're staying home, and it's just a great way to be active. So mountain biking, or even trail riding or riding around a lake. I love that as a hobby.
Yeah. Absolutely. And for me, anything outdoors is great. So gardening, I'm loving that right now because we're in the spring. So changing out all of the plants and shrubs and mulch. But then when we have the opportunity, when all these restrictions are lifted to get back indoors, I love to support my daughters in volleyball. So volleyball is my sport of choice.
Nice. That's awesome. And last question would be, do you guys have a role model that you look up to?
Yeah, so that is actually a great question. And somebody asked that not too long ago. And I had shared about a gentleman that I had met at GE about, 17 years ago. Now I'm aging myself. And he is great. But now I would have to say that Marcus Lemonis, who is the host of The Prophet, and he's also the CEO of Camping World. I love him. I love his business, model. And I really look to him most recently for, how I'm going about some of my daily actions.
I'll say Steve Jobs. I mean, everything about him just really stands out to me. He was just consistently challenging the norms. And obviously he's created some great products that we love. So between him and then, God, I just forgot his name. The Tesla guy. Kelly, help me out. What is his name?
Oh, well,
Elon
now
Musk?
Yes, Elon Musk. Yep. Yeah. It's the Monday fog.
Yes.
Right.
So I mean, I love what he's doing with Tesla, different products out there, but even being able to help out right now with the situation and get ventilators out to organizations that need it. So just really respect him.
Yeah.
That's great. Cool. So how can people find you guys?
On LinkedIn. So you can reach out to myself, Kelly Stinson, or you could put in hashtag the Potty Princess. That is a nickname I garnered a couple of years ago. So you can find me there. And Anselmo, how about you?
The best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. So just look me up, Anselmo Torres III.
There we go.
Great. And I'll be posting a link to both of Anselmo and Kelly's LinkedIn profiles after this podcast. And really appreciate you guys coming on. This is a great show, and I think it's very informative for a lot of our listeners, including myself. And we got a lot out of it for sure.
Great.
So great. And please subscribe to the Discovering Multifamily podcast. We're available on iTunes. Please write us a review as well, an honest review. And also you can rate us on the star rating. It helps our ranking in iTunes. In addition, you can listen to our show if you go to redknightproperties.com. That's the company that I run. We have a podcast/media section where we have a list of all our podcasts, and you can find Kelly and Anselmo's show there. So thanks again, guys, for coming on, and really appreciate it. And we'll definitely be in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you for having us.
Great. Thank you.